This episode contains graphic descriptions of abuse and death. Please take care while listening. I first reported on the story of Karla Jo Nieland last year, in 2022. A reader had emailed a colleague of mine, and it was forwarded to me. Karla Jo was 18 years old when she was killed in the spring of 1981. Like many Minnesota high school students in the 80s, she had attended a farm party with her boyfriend and friends. They gathered at the farm to drink, smoke, and hang out. Yet in the early hours of the following morning, Karla Jo's body was discovered in her boyfriend's vehicle. She had been brutally beaten. Her shirt and bra were found in the nearby farm field, not too far from her boyfriend's shirt and car keys. Her boyfriend, John Keep, was the main suspect. When officers arrived at the scene, it seemed like an open and shut case. Karla Jo's blood was all over him. The theory was that John Keep had killed his girlfriend under the heavy influence of alcohol. A couple days later, John Keep was formally charged with second and third-degree murder. The evidence against him seemed staggering. Karla Jo was found dead in his vehicle. Her blood was all over him. His belongings were found near her clothing in the field, and the lacerations on her face seemed to match up with a horseshoe ring he wore. And that's why, when he went to trial, and a jury deliberated for mere hours before returning a not guilty verdict, a lot of people in the towns of Hoffman and nearby Kensington were shocked. I wanted to know why the jury returned the not guilty verdict. Clearly, there was more to this story. So, last year, I drove to the Grant County Courthouse to obtain any documents I could related to the trial. And I learned that all of the trial documents, which are technically public documents, had been sealed. We can't be sure who made the request for the documents to be sealed, but we do know it was signed off by Judge Amy Dahl, who was appointed in 2016. When I was working on this story last year, I reached out to John Keep, and in turn, I received a call from his lawyer. He asked that I no longer contact his client. Just a few weeks ago, a reader reached out to me. This person had court documents related to the case from an appeal John Keep's legal team had made to the Minnesota State Supreme Court prior to his trial. Those court documents revealed more information about the case, more information about what happened the night Karla Jo died, and, essentially, the reasons why the jury likely decided the way they did. They also show that John Keep's lawyers were attempting to keep him out of the adult judicial system on arguments that he wasn't a threat to the public. He was 17 years old at the time of Karla Jo's death. And maybe most interesting, the document showed that prior to the trial, John Keep's legal team had appealed the second-degree murder charge on the grounds that John Keep didn't intend for his actions to lead to Karla Jo's death. You're listening to The Vault. I'm Trisha Turinskis. Authorities at the time said that Karla Jo's beating was the worst they had ever seen. She was discovered shirtless in the passenger seat of John Keep's vehicle. Karla Jo had been beaten in nearly all areas of her body, including her legs, arms, upper chest, and face. She was then strangled. Her shirt, sweater, and bra were discovered in the field on the farm's property. John Keep's shirt and car keys were discovered nearby, in that same field. Karla Jo was likely unconscious from blows to the head by the time she was strangled to death. That's according to Dr. Larry Frapp, the Grant County coroner at the time, and Dr. Mehdi Orandi, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy. A horseshoe ring worn by John Keep seemed to match multiple lacerations found on Karla Jo's face. As we noted before, her blood was found on John Keep's body. For law enforcement arriving on the scene, it appeared as though a drunken disagreement led to a murder. An angry boyfriend had seemingly snapped, causing the violent death of a young woman. The coroner estimated Karla Jo's time of death at around 3:30 a.m. on May 17, 1981. A friend of the couple, whose home was located on the farm property, told law enforcement that he spoke to Karla Jo and John Keep at around 3 a.m. before going to bed. That's according to the Minnesota State Supreme Court documents. The conversation took place in the field where Karla Jo's belongings were later discovered. According to court documents filed on behalf of the county, John Keep had allegedly admitted to that same friend, in a panic, following Karla Jo's death, that he had killed her. John Keep had a history of alcohol abuse, and he had been in and out of treatment facilities. Just months before her death, Karla Jo and John Keep planned on having a baby. Court documents reveal that pregnancy ended in a heartbreaking miscarriage. The court documents reveal that those close to the couple alleged that John Keep had hit Karla Jo in the past. With the physical evidence, witness statements, and pattern of alcohol use and abuse, Grant County officials were confident when just days after Karla Jo was found, they arrested John Keep on second and third degree murder charges related to her death. Prior to the public trial and not guilty verdict, John Keep's legal team was fighting another battle, one we mentioned before. A battle that sought to keep his case in the juvenile justice system. John Keep's team claimed he should be tried as a juvenile, in part because the public safety would not be served by trying him as an adult. They also argued for second-degree charges to be dropped, as the second-degree charge insinuates an intent to kill. John Keep's legal team argued that he did not intend to kill Karla Jo. Instead, they made the argument that he didn't want the victim to die. The horseshoe marks on her face, for example, are attributed by his legal team to have been made by, quote, backhand slaps and not bludgeoning blows, as if he was trying to kill her. His legal team cited evidence that he wore his horseshoe ring on the right hand, which would be consistent with backhand slap marks on the left side of her face. A slap, they argued, didn't show intent to kill. Here's what one of his lawyers wrote in the appeal. His actions were not those which would be expected of one who intends to and does commit murder. His legal team went on to argue that his intoxicated state altered his ability to attempt to kill Karla Jo. The appeal states John Keep sought immediate help from the friend who lived on the farm property, along with help from his parents. He also complied with law enforcement. All of this, they argued, showed that John Keep was intoxicated and not in a state of mind that would allow one to intentionally kill another individual. Here's also what a member of John Keep's legal team wrote in the appeal. The fact and manner of death may make a person shudder, but to say that the juvenile intended to effect the victim's death is contrary to the evidence taken as a whole and a clearly erroneous interpretation of the provisions. In the end, the judge ruled against the appeals. John Keep stood trial in Grant County Court as an adult on third and second degree murder charges. Moving on to the trial, John Keep's defense pivoted. It was time to prove, despite the evidence against him, that there could be more to the story of what happened the night Karla Jo died. There was one aspect of John Keep's recollection of the evening of Karla Jo's death that the investigators and prosecution may have underestimated. In fact, I think we can say they did. The individual who provided information to the prosecution that John Keep had allegedly stated he killed Karla Jo was the same person who stated he saw John Keep and Karla Jo together less than an hour before her death. John Keep claimed that that individual, who testified against him, had actually knocked him in the back of the head around the time of Karla Jo's death, hard enough to cause him to black out. I'm not stating this friend's name because this person was never charged with a crime related to Karla Jo's death. The case is still open. In a sense, the defense insinuated that the friend pointing the finger at John Keep could have had a part in Karla Jo's death. The defense team painted a picture of a young man who was in love, a young man who was possibly framed for the murder of his girlfriend. In court, John Keep took the stand. He wept as he talked about the deep love he had for Karla Jo. His defense team stated her blood was discovered on him because when he found her in his vehicle, when he came to, he tried to save her. He held her in his arms. That's what John Keep said on the stand. The defense pointed to his cooperation with law enforcement, his heartache, and his attempts to get help in the moments after he discovered Karla Jo's body as further reason for the jury to question whether John Keep, without a reasonable doubt, was guilty of murdering his girlfriend. After just hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. John Keep was found to be not guilty in the murder of Karla Jo Nieland. The community was, and some might argue still is, in shock. The case remains an open investigation. No suspects have been named or arrested since the trial. In 2002, I interviewed Grant County Attorney Justin Anderson. He said there hasn't been much movement on the case.
But, it is certainly possible that, the person who committed the murder has been acquitted of that murder. So.
To read the full story and see pictures, head to inforum.com/thevault. I'm Trisha Turinskis. Thank you for listening.